is no vaccination for Zika, and there's no prophylaxis for Zika, and there's no treatment for Zika.
These games should go ahead as planned, and we should continue to work to make sure they're as safe as possible.
At the end of the day, it's up to the individual. But the present recommendation from the authorities of infectious disease is that you do not visit a Zika virus area if you are pregnant.
We've got enough of our problems already.
With a little under a month to go before the start of the Rio 2016 Olympics, of course, Team South Africa is just about to announce which one of our athletes are going to be representing Mzansi out in Brazil. But there is also that little matter that's divided the world, with some even calling for the postponement of the Olympics. Of course, that is the Zika virus. But what exactly is the Zika virus, and what measures have been put in place to ensure that not only the athletes who will be leaving the country and heading over to Brazil, but also everyone else who are part of the support structures are safe when in Brazil? Well, join us today as we discuss this very issue, and of course also find out how we're making sure that everyone is safe. In an Olympic year, as it gets closer to the start of the event, it's normal that excitement is almost at a boiling point as athletes from all around the world look forward to claiming some medals for their countries. But the Rio Olympics have somewhat been different. The excitement has been clouded by the prevalent scare of the Zika virus that has now been declared a pandemic, a virus that has proven to have a stranglehold in Brazil. In the past few months, the general public and athletes alike have shown grave concern over the virus and raised a considerable number of arguments as to whether participating in this year's Olympics is worth the risk. The Brazilians have assured the public, and the World Health Organization has also stepped in to calm the storm.
WHO's response to the concern about the timing of the Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro is that, based on a very careful risk assessment and all the information we've gathered so far about this disease, these games should go ahead as planned, and we should continue to work to make sure they're as safe as possible.
While WHO have declared that the Olympics must go on, the fight to combat the virus elevated, with potential risk of infection climbing every single day, especially for young ones.
Problem is that the complications of this relatively mild illness do have potentially devastating effects for families. To have a child with microcephaly and to have a tenfold increase in numbers, and the potential for spread, not just across Latin America, but into Africa, into Asia, which have the highest birth rates in the world, we believe is a matter of public health concern and constitutes an international emergency.
The fight against the Zika virus is on, and the Olympics have been given the green light. For our athletes who have chosen to represent the country, their bags have already been packed, but their health safety remains a great concern. About 150 doctors from around the world, 2 of whom are South African, wrote to the World Health Organization asking for the Olympics to either be moved from Rio or postponed altogether. Now, when it comes to such big sporting events, unfortunately, they get planned years in advance, so it's not that easy to just postpone them. So what exactly is the Zika virus, and are these doctors justified in asking for the Olympic Games to be moved? Well, we found out from the experts. Prof, let's start from the very beginning. What is the Zika virus?
So the Zika virus was named for the Zika forest, where it was first identified in monkeys in 1947 in Uganda, while they were conducting research for yellow fever.
Aha. So we're in this Olympic year, but every time you mention the Olympics, you can't mention the Olympics without talking about the Zika virus.
Yes.
Why the big hoo-ha around it?
Well, for many years it circulated at a very low level in Africa, probably causing very mild or no disease, then moved to Asia, and only in the last 4 or 5 years, I think the virus has mutated, it's moved around the world, Polynesia, and then to Brazil, where in 2014, 2015, there was a big outbreak, and it was noted to have an association, or thought to have an association, with microcephaly in newborn babies whose mothers had been infected.
Explain microcephaly.
So that's a small head, and it usually goes together with an undeveloped brain, brain deformities, children are often blind, so quite severe neurological problems. So it really has changed quite a lot in the years since it circulated in Africa.
So this is something that not only affects adults, but it's something that affects unborn children. So is that why there's a lot more emphasis on why people need to be using condoms when in Rio?
Yeah, so in adults, it generally causes very mild illness, fever, headache, conjunctivitis, redness of the eyes, a rash, muscle pains, and they get better. And in fact, only 1 in 4 of people infected will show clinical signs. But it's really the effect on the unborn fetus when the mother is infected and it's transmitted through the placenta that has caused the major concern and has led to the public health emergency being declared.
Now, part of the reason we're doing this interview with you, Prof, is because of the fact that there was 150 doctors around the world, 2 of whom come from South Africa, who had written to the World Health Organization asking for the Olympics to either be moved or postponed.
So I think it was out of concern that if you have a mass gathering and people come from many parts of the world, they could become infected and then perhaps take the Zika virus back to their own countries where the mosquito that transmit the virus may be found and set up epidemics. Yeah. So I think that's kind of not really a major issue. I think the outbreak, in fact, has peaked. It's going down in Brazil. The mosquito population will be much less because it's winter, it's the dry season, and a lot has been done to address mosquito control, particularly around the Olympic villages. So I think the risks of Zika for tourists, for delegates or spectators, the teams, would be extremely low. And there are additional precautions that one can take personally.
What is the latest from the World Health Organization?
So they did have a meeting last week to look at the state of the public health emergency, which was declared because of the concern around the effect on the fetus, not so much the adults. And I think the decision there was to continue with the Olympics, and it really was I think related to exactly what you said, that the risks would be very low. Didn't see a risk of people taking it home and transmitting it locally or in their own countries. Outside of the mass gathering, there was nothing specific about the Olympics that kind of could contribute to that.
The World Health Organization has been on top of it, and obviously if the World Health Organization says that it's safe, then I would assume that it is safe.
In recent time, there was about 150 doctors from around the world, 2 of whom were South African, who asked whether the Rio Olympics could either be moved to a different venue or to be postponed to a later date. Of course, being the Olympic Games, it's not that easy to just postpone such a big sporting event. But what exactly is the Zika virus, and why is there so much concern around it?
The threat is real because if you look at the authority in the infectious disease space, who is your World Health Organization and your CDC, your communicable disease control and prevention body, they have declared Zika virus an epidemic. And in February this year, they declared it a public health problem of international magnitude. So from a public health point of view, which is in the general population, it is important. But let's talk about the individual athlete, especially the women of childbearing, who are the people who are going to Rio now. We use their CDC recommendations. So what do you want? You don't want them to get pregnant, or you don't want them to be pregnant. So what is your approach? You take an athlete, you say, is their athlete male or female? If they are female, are they pregnant or are they not pregnant? If they are pregnant, no go zone. No go zone. At the end of the day, it's up to the individual. But the present recommendation from the authorities of infectious disease is that you do not visit a Zika virus area if you are pregnant. It is not worth the risk. However, remember, this is not law. It is a guideline and a recommendation. At the end of the day, it depends on the individual athlete or on the individual patient. But as a sports physician, if I had an athlete who is pregnant, I would strongly discourage them from going to Brazil. Now let's talk about that one who is not pregnant but is in childbearing age. Then they have to take precautions. I would strongly recommend that they are on very effective contraception so that you make sure that they do not fall pregnant. Now you're going to ask me, how long? Are they not going to fall pregnant for the rest of their lives? The general recommendation from WHO and CDC is that at least 8 weeks. For 8 weeks of their coming back, they should not fall pregnant.
It seems the Zika virus is leaving no stones unturned. While it is the women that look like they are more exposed to risk, the men too are not immune to the virus. Not at all.
What do you say to a man who's just visited a Zika area or a man who's just had a Zika virus disease? You request them to use protection for at least 6 months. Now, why is it eight weeks for the girls and 6 months for the boys? It's because, unfortunately, now it lives in there has been Zika found in semen of men who have Zika virus disease. It is not yet clear what happens to the men who are asymptomatic, that are not sick. But to be on the safe side, I would use a blanket rule and say, for 6 months, you use protection, you do not attempt to fall pregnant.
People around the world have got differing views when it comes to the Zika virus and the Olympic Games. Khona Kaya, we're ever vocal, so it is no different. Of course, we have our own opinions, so we took to the streets to find out what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, you represent the country. I mean, like abantu ababhaya vele like makuvela ama opportunity kanje bayafuna vele ukuziveza kwabona kwamanye amazwe ukuthi yabo ba showcase talent lakhe babone ukuthi nathi kayisidume ngani. So regardless of disease nani, I think maybe mafika kara khona maybe something ene bazokunika yona for leso sikhathi ukuthi okay ezinkara abanganigaya itse kanje ukuthi okay nikwazi ukurepresent the country, then from then yabuya kayini.
Yeah, baqhubeke ba mara bangayi endaweni lezi ngathi zisemanzini ngoba uma mosquito vele bathanda la ngathi kunamanzi khona.
I won't go because like many avoid such izinto like ukuthi like impilo yakhe actually at the end. So angeke kuzo ama opportunities mabha besides ukuthi eBrazil and so on, then I won't go because mina ngicabanga health yami and there are many things engisafuna ukuzi-achieve besides to get Brazil and so on.
Ngiye hawu ngingaya kanjani angithi Zika i-affect kakhulu abantu besimama compared to abantu besilisa. Iy'ngane zami zona zenze njani uma ngifuna ukumitha, uma ngabe ngimithi khona manje ngizoyenze njani, shuthi zoba ingane yami sengihambisa nje emanzini kanjalo, cha ngeke.
You can't take major precautions against it. Akuna preventive measures ukuthi if you like vaccination, akuna vaccination, but it's just to take care of yourself, to apply some creams that will be given to them, and then hopefully even in Brazil I'm sure they will be cautious.
We've got enough of our problems already.
Bungengiye ngoba izifo ezikhona ngale azikho right, so bengabuya ngasekho right, bengatholi izifo le.
The South African national women's football team, Banyana Banyana, are currently in preparations for a second bite of Olympic cherry. But of course, this time around, heading off to Rio, where the Zika virus affects mainly unborn children, and them being women, they are fully aware of the effect of the Zika virus, especially even when they've returned.
What I know is that it's very dangerous when it comes to females, more so females than males. And so, I mean, you kind of cautious, and I mean, I feel our medical staff will do their best to figure out more and to protect us and do their best in that, and we're confident that they will. So yeah, I mean, it is what it is. We've qualified and we're going, and I mean, you can't let a virus stop you.
Well, we know about it, but I don't know much about the virus and how it comes from. But we focus really on our football, going out there to do our best, and you know, get as far as we possibly can. And when the virus does come our way, I'm sure people out there that have knowledge about it will deal with it the way it's supposed to, and for us to carry on with our football and be ready for whatever comes our way.
The World Health Organization has been on top of it, and obviously if the World Health Organization says that it's safe, then I would assume that it is safe. And if they didn't think that it was safe, they would put up and say that we cannot go. And fortunately for us, they had said that it's safe, that we can go, and we're looking forward to it. We must just hope that we don't get bitten by a mosquito.
For me, I've just been concentrating on my game and really trying to make sure that the team is ready. I do know that we have a good medical team that will make sure that we get the necessary maybe vaccination if it is that we need any. But I think we are in good hands, and we're hoping that this doesn't really spoil the tournament for the athletes. So we're just hoping that we can go out there with a good medical team that will look after us.
You don't have to worry too much about Team South Africa, however, because when they do travel to Brazil, they won't be on their own. They will be surrounded by a team of doctors who know all there is to know about the Zika virus. When our national teams travel to areas that are high risk because of mosquitoes, their doctors give them all manner of vaccines. But the Zika virus is a different beast altogether.
There is no vaccination for Zika, and there's no prophylaxis for Zika, and there's no treatment for Zika. So what we then do as teams, what we are prepared to do as Team South Africa is to do more preventative measures. For instance, we have to take your DEET-containing product like your lotion, like your Peaceful Sleep, like your Tabat cream that you apply on the skin so that you prevent mosquito bite. We have to try by all means most of the time to have long-sleeved shirts and long pants. We're going to be in a village, but in a hotel, and the hotel has to have good like air condition. It has to be well ventilated, because if it is well ventilated, then it prevents such. So those are the measures that we are prepared to take. Unfortunately, we can't take like your yellow fever vaccine as yellow fever to prevent it, because there's no other thing that you can take to have as a prophylaxis, either tablets or injection.
We've seen different countries who will be participating at the Olympics taking drastic measures to protect their athletes. Take the South Koreans, for instance, who've developed a suit that is meant to keep mosquitoes at bay. Now, like Kaya, we have Sabc, whose sole mission is to make sure that our athletes are safe. What do they have to say about the Zika virus?
We monitor basically on a daily basis. We have a chief medical officer, Dr. Kevin Subban, whose one task is to make sure that we're on top of that aspect. The organizing committee on their side have put measures in place to ensure the best control over the virus. The actual living quarters now has air conditioning, when previously it wasn't going to have that. There's measures around anti-mosquito bite, these powders and creams and stuff that will be provided by the organizers. We will also provide for our team anyway to take that stuff. We're monitoring. The World Health Organization is indicating that, look, there is the threat of the virus, but there are measures in place to ensure safety.
All around the world, athletes are pulling out of the Rio Olympic Games because of the virus scare. And the same is happening in South Africa as well, something Sabc can't do anything about.
Look, it's an individual choice. Eventually, it comes down to people saying we're planning families, we're young, we're getting married when we come back. Those things we're going to take into account because of the serious risk in terms of the Zika virus. And if you contract that in those conditions, then the repercussions are quite extreme. I think athletes, families will have to draw a distinction between what is the measures that are put into place versus eventually you'll take an individual decision.
It is not just the athletes that Sabc needs to worry about, as some of them will be taking families along as well. And who will be taking care of the rest of the South African travellers?
I can't preempt. All I can say is what we have in place. What happens on the day is what one faces, you know. So we've done the necessary in terms of the precautions, and I'm sure athletes and officials themselves will have to take precautions. You know, in any country you travel, they'll tell you don't go to this area is not safe, don't get into a taxi that's not marked as a taxi. Those are things that people need to be aware of.
While there is this cloud that is hanging over the Rio Olympics, the host nation is doing all that they can in order to make sure that there are no disruptions to the Rio Olympics. And of course, this is some of the different ways that they are using in order to combat any outbreaks.
We have issued quite strict and clear guidelines of how to prevent getting infected by the Zika virus. And really, prevention is primarily based on preventing a mosquito bite. So there's a number of methods that we've outlined. Firstly, in terms of protective clothing, wearing long-sleeved shirts and long-sleeved pants, light clothing, because it will be hot in that time. Important to wear mosquito repellent, which has got the correct active ingredients in those areas of your skin that will be exposed outside of your clothing. Very important also to be mindful of the space that you'll be sleeping in. So making sure that the windows are closed, that there's good circulation and ventilation in terms of air conditioning so that we can keep mosquitoes outside and not inside the room. Avoiding areas that have got stagnant water because we know that the mosquitoes will sort of collect there.
The Brazilian government has adopted major precautions, including the removal of any possible mosquito breeding sites at the Olympic venues. And for our athletes, staying behind is not an option.
It's very important for me to emphasize that as a medical practitioner who has the athlete and the patient's best interest at heart, I would never advise somebody to travel to an area where I felt that the risk was too high. That being said, it's important that each athlete is comfortable with their decision to travel to Rio, and that will very much depend on their personal circumstances. In terms of the risk of Zika virus to the average person, as I've said, many people who get bitten by the mosquito will not even manifest the symptoms, and those who do get the symptoms will have very mild symptoms of fever, headache, rash, conjunctivitis. The exception to the rule is those people who are either pregnant, so athletes who are currently pregnant, or spectators who are currently pregnant, or those who are planning to fall pregnant shortly thereafter, because we know that there is a very real and serious risk of fetal abnormalities in those specific circumstances. And I think it becomes a personal decision that you make if those are your circumstances, or of course, if you're not comfortable with the level of risk that has been described, which is that which I've described previously. Under those circumstances, I think it's very important that we provide athletes and spectators who are planning to go with the full scope of information that we have about the illness. And it is their absolute right to then make a decision based on that.
As things stand, there is no cure for the Zika virus, and as someone who herself is going to the Olympic Games, as to whether the resolutions that have been put in place will be working or not, I guess sizobona masibuya. But otherwise, that's all we have for you right here on Full Coverage this week. Be sure to join us same time next week as we deal with another topical matter. Don't forget, you can communicate with us on Twitter. All the details are on your screen. From me, Mphaphuli, it's adios.